My guest today is Dr. Silvia Hodges Silverstein, CEO of the Buying Legal Council, which is an international organisation for professionals tasked with sourcing legal services and managing legal service supplier relationships. Founded in 2014, the Buying Legal Council has members across the globe with a particularly strong member base in North America and Europe, where there's been an extensive focus on the buying of legal services over the past decade. I'm really excited to speak with Silvia today about the legal procurement movement and what we can expect in the legal industry as we head into a global recession. Thank you for joining me, Silvia.
Thank you so much for having me, Sacha.
The focus on procurement of legal services really emerged in the US and Europe following the global financial crisis. Why is it that procurement started to get involved in the legal category, and what impact have they had?
Well, so I have been researching how clients buy legal services for about 15, 20 years now. I guess I need to find a different hobby. But in about 2010, as you said, during the last financial crisis, I noticed that procurement was starting to get involved. And it was really the companies with significant legal spending that started to involve procurement. And when we talk about significant legal spending, so we're really talking about millions and millions of dollars in legal spend. So we're talking not only tens, but some of them hundreds of millions of dollars. And so they started to involve procurement in the evaluation and the selection of legal service providers. As you said, during the financial crisis, the CEOs, CFOs, or boards started to look at all sorts of different cost savings areas, and they initiated legal procurement opportunities and brought in trained buying professionals. And among the first industries to embrace legal procurement were highly regulated industries such as the pharma companies, financial services institutions, as well as energy companies and utilities. For a long time, in many companies, legal sort of used to be exempt from the intense cost scrutiny that pretty much all other areas of companies had been facing for years or for decades. And then I would say the last financial crisis that we had in North America and in Europe were a catalyst. And I think it would have happened anyways, but because of the crisis, it accelerated this adoption of bringing in procurement and assisting the legal departments. So I think that COVID and the recession that we are now facing, probably continue to face for a while, is likely to cause a second wave of cost cutting with the help of procurement professionals.
Australia didn't experience the economic severity of the GFC. However, we're now facing a recession, and organisations are naturally looking for cost reduction strategies. What can we expect to see more of in Australia and the APAC region?
So I do think that you probably see a similar path that we took 10 years ago. And it is really about moving from a more, let's say, laissez-faire or passive management approach to legal spend to a more active approach to legal spend management. And so I suspect you will see much more engagement with outside counsel, more hiring of perhaps alternative legal service providers, perhaps also more sophisticated scoping of legal work. In general, what we're really experiencing is a wider variety of approaches that can be helping both the law firm and the client when you develop like strategic partnerships, that you say, okay, so we're not just about asking for bigger and bigger discounts, but that you actually say, so how can we work together and how can we make this a win-win? Because call me naive and to kumbaya, but I think that in order to have any staying power and be sustainable, it needs to be good for both the client as well as the legal service provider.
In the current environment, I'm really interested in hearing what you're seeing organisations' reactions being to the COVID situation.
What's really interesting is, from a procurement perspective, the a supply chain for legal service is not broken. It's not a situation that other goods and services are facing right now, where really they have issues to just get the products and services they normally buy. So that's not broken. But what I believe we will see very soon is more of a focus on legal and legal spend again. We have asked a couple of weeks ago, we asked people in procurement, how is your organization handling the COVID-19 situation? And the majority, I think that 68%, were cutting all non-essential costs. Then the next one was pushing non-urgent work to a later date. And the third one of the top 3 reactions to COVID was extension of payment terms. So from 30 days to 60 days or 90 days. So I think we'll see much more of that. Other approaches were to renegotiate agreements with firms and suppliers, or to ask for additional discounts. But I think that we'll see much more of these ways to deal with the crisis, because, as you said, lots of companies are struggling now and need to find ways to identify savings in all different areas, including legal.
So traditionally, procurement's been involved in, assisting with setting up legal panels and negotiating discounted rates. What other cost management initiatives are there?
So there are a number of, let's say, procurement tools that are commonly used, from things like negotiating discounts to issuing and enforcing outside counsel guidelines. Almost everyone does that. Issuing RFPs has become very common in our industry. Negotiating alternative fee arrangements have become much more normal in many markets. Requiring e-billing has become quite standard. Establishing panels or preferred lists of providers is a pretty common approach as well. And what we also see is that there are some areas that are, I would say, up and coming. So lots of people are already planning on doing that. Some are already doing it. So they're only becoming more important. That would be the pre-matter scoping. We see a lot of growth in that area. We also see a lot of growth in the area of application of legal project management, as well as increasingly data analytics. So those are things that we see, and I think anyone working in procurement is well served by understanding what the possibilities are and then using them for your organization.
How can procurement get their general counsel and legal teams on board? Unless
the GC is already a fan of procurement and happy to work with procurement, I think that the procurement department or the procurement professionals tasked with legal and tasked with assisting legal really need to make themselves indispensable for the legal department. And I think that can be done in a number of ways. They really need to get to know their colleagues in the legal department. They need to listen and understand what are the things that they are struggling with. How do they currently approach the buying of legal services? And are there any parts that they might not like doing? Very often it is the negotiations about price, so they can offer their help and do the things that they are very well trained to do, whereas legal might not be trained to do that, or they might not want to do it. So those are the kind of things to make yourself useful and really educate yourself. Every industry, every area has its own lingo, its abbreviations, and so really learn how to speak that way. Some people call it the legalese, so learn how to speak legalese and gain credibility. Maybe don't try to go in and say, we think that you could use a different firm for your next big M&A transaction, but start perhaps with some the so-called ancillary legal service providers, or some other services that maybe the legal department is less invested in, and show what you're able to do, show some successes, and gain the in-house counsel, the legal department as your friends and colleagues. And I think that's really important.
What advice would you have for procurement leaders in Australia and indeed the Asia Pacific region as they embark on this new category?
You really have the advantage in Australia and the APAC region that you can see what companies in North America and the EMEA region have done, what has worked, which tools they might have been using, what doesn't work, and just really learn from their mistakes. There are lots of best practices out now. Legal procurement is no longer really pioneers land, so there are lots of tried and tested things. Understand which tools are out there, but really see what has worked and translate that into your marketplace and make that your own.
How can the Buying Legal Council help procurement leaders in Australia?
So we are the trade organization for legal procurement professionals, and anyone who buys legal services, ancillary legal services, or legal technology. And we have the largest amount of resources for buying legal services and managing supplier relationships. As I said before, you do not need to reinvent the wheel. You've had other colleagues and peers who have been where you are now, and you can learn from that. We have lots of onboarding materials and continued education materials, best practices, templates, and so on, primers, cheat sheets, webinars, any resource that you can hope for. We probably have it, and if we don't have it, we'll work hard to make it happen soon. So please join us.
Thank you so much for your time today, Silvia. It was a really fascinating discussion.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope this was useful, and all the best with your approach to buying legal services.